A tax collector in Jesus' time was not somebody who worked for the IRS. Although we don't necessarily just adore it when we hear somebody from the IRS calling us on the phone and say they want to come meet with us. But a person who worked as a tax collector in Jesus' time worked, as we just sang in that hymn, for the hated Roman rule. And tax collectors were considered to be unpatriotic and actually not good Jews because of this. Because one of the things to be a good Jew is you couldn't associate beyond a certain very superficial level with Gentiles. And of course, they did. But more to the point, tax collectors were widely considered to be dishonest. They used their power, their office, given them by the Roman conquerors to extort more money than was required, and therefore to line their own pockets. Does anyone who lives in Orleans Parish have any experience with officials who do things like this? Even if you don't live in Orleans Parish, you live in the greater New Orleans area. And this week we have been treated to yet another series of indictments of our elected officials who have scandalously taken money, but before the storm and after the storm, designed to help the poorest and the neediest, the people, especially the at-risk inner-city youth, and just line their pockets with it. So this is not something that just happened in the days of the Roman Empire, folks. We live with it right here. And so we can understand the contempt that people felt for our friend, the great disciple and evangelist, Matthew. Can we not? So what happened? How did this crumb, who was enriching himself by taking unjustly the money that he could extort out of his own fellow Jews and get away with not handing over to the Romans? This guy, how does he become the great evangelist Matthew, one of the 12 disciples? What happened? Could that even happen in New Orleans? Well, what happened, of course, is what we just read. Jesus walked by. Jesus walked by and saw him. He didn't see him buying vegetables at the market. He saw him in his tax collector office doing his not very respectable job. And right there at work, while Matthew's being Matthew, and I won't say any names of our local folks, but you can just supply them yourself. Jesus looks at him and says, "Follow me." Now, I don't know about you, but I have a powerful empathy with those scribes and Pharisees who say, "What in the world is Jesus doing eating with that guy?" Any of y'all feel a little bit like that? Well, anyway, let's just see what happened to Matthew. All it says, and this is, of course, Matthew's gospel. That's what makes it so wonderful. And he rose and followed him. That's it. He got out. He left the office. I don't know if he locked up the old Don James. I don't know. It doesn't say. But there was something about that call of Jesus. It was immediate. It was profound. Jesus didn't say, "Quit your wicked ways, Matthew." He said instead, "Follow me." And he did. And evidently, as so often these stories go, whether they're the stories about Jesus or whether they're the stories that Jesus tells, his parables, what's the first thing you do? You have a party. You have a banquet. Have you ever thought about that? Think of the parable of the prodigal son. First thing, when the son finally gets back, tell Daddy Pat, sit down, bring the wine, bring the music. Well, here we see Matthew follows Jesus and evidently goes straight to a dinner party, presumably in Matthew's house, because Jesus doesn't have a house. And in the Greek, it's just being his. You have to figure it out. Context, Matthew's a rich tax collector. He's got a house. He follows Jesus, and like Zacchaeus in the other story, another tax collector who Jesus calls, he says, come to my house. So there they are. And naturally, who are the friends of Matthew? Tax collectors and sinners. And remember, sinners is a technical term for anybody who deliberately defies the Jewish law, who's a Jew, who deliberately refuses to live according to the code. Well, naturally, they're Matthew's friends, so they're at his house. So Jesus invites them to a banquet, or he rather comes to his house and makes it into a banquet by his presence. And everybody that's a friend of Matthew comes and sits down, and there's Jesus and all his disciples, and naturally, the other people, the good people, the respectable people, the people who are trying to live good lives and don't cheat, and don't do extortion, and don't take bribes, don't siphon off public funds to buy SUVs, and all the other stuff. They are outraged. What is Jesus doing with them? And why are they outraged? Because Jesus is a great prophet. Everybody acknowledges that Jesus speaks with authority. Everybody acknowledges that Jesus has healed the sick. Everybody knows that Jesus seems to have been sent from God. Well, somebody comes who's sent from God. What in the world is he doing inviting that person to follow him? Why not me? Well, why not me? Anyway. So here's the way the story ends. Jesus knows what these people are saying, and he turns and says, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. And since they are such great students of the law and the prophet, he quotes from Hosea. Go and learn what this means. You can quote it, I desire mercy or steadfast love, and not sacrifice. But you haven't learned what it means. It's been there in your scriptures for 800 years, and you don't know it. You can quote it, but you don't know it.